I stopped working at 65. My son's mortgage is $5,000. My in-law called, demanding to know who paid for the $3,000 card game money. Lily Joanne and her husband struggled after buying a house. After falling ill, they wished to return to their hometown to retire. But their daughter-in-law refused to pay the mortgage. The daughter-in-law secretly supported her mother's card games. This angered Lily Joanne. In the end, the couple decided to return to their hometown to live self-sufficiently, to enjoy a peaceful old age, and learned to let go of their expectations of their children. Who paid for the $3,000 card game money? My mother-in-law's sharp voice came through the phone, like a sharp knife, instantly piercing my heart. I gripped my phone tightly, speechless for a moment, not knowing how to respond. Outside the window, the familiar mountains and waters of my hometown gradually blurred in the twilight. But I felt an unprecedented sense of confusion. Hello? Li Juan, did you hear me? If you stop paying Xiaofan's mortgage, they won't support me. So, who's going to pay for my $3,000 card game money? My mother-in-law's aggressive voice rang out again. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my emotions. Mother-in-law. But before I could finish speaking, the busy tone from the other end of the phone interrupted me. I stood dazed in front of the window, recalling the conversation just now, my heart a mixture of emotions. Li Juan, who was on the phone? My husband. Wang Jingwo's voice came from behind, interrupting my thoughts. I turned around, looking at his haggard face, forcing out a weak smile. It's nothing, just mother-in-law calling. Seeing the concerned look in my husband's eyes, suddenly, tears streamed down my face, and I recounted the conversation word for word. As I spoke, the memories surged like a tide into my heart. My name is Li Juan. I am 65 years old this year. I was born in a remote mountain village, and after graduating from elementary school, I began working in the fields. At the age of 22, I married Wang Jingwo, my childhood sweetheart. In the third year after our marriage, we had our son, Xiaofan. To provide a better life for our child, Jingwo and I lived frugally, raising Xiaofan with great hardship. 15 years ago, our 25-year-old Xiaofan got married. We exhausted our savings to buy them a 2-bedroom wedding house. 8 years ago, after our daughter-in-law, Xiaoqin, gave birth to their second child, they found the house too small, sold the 2-bedroom, and replaced it with a large 4-bedroom, with a monthly mortgage payment of $5,000. Seeing the young couple worry about the mortgage, Jingwo and I felt deeply distressed. Jingwo's over 5,000 yuan salary was entirely given to them to pay the mortgage, and my over 2,000 yuan pension was almost all spent on our grandchildren. Our own life was tight, but seeing the children's happy and contented little family, we felt that all the hardship was worth it. However, 2 months ago, 66-year-old Jingwo suddenly fell ill. Lying on the hospital bed, he held my hand and said, Li Juan, I feel like my body is getting worse day by day. Let's go back to our hometown. I want to spend my remaining years in a familiar place. Hearing this, a pang of sadness filled my heart. We had sacrificed so much for our son, and now, in our old age and illness, we didn't even have the qualification to retire in the city. But seeing Jingwo's increasingly gaunt face, I nodded. All right, we'll go home. Before returning, we informed Xiaofan and Xiaoqin of our decision. When they heard we were going to stop paying the mortgage, their faces immediately changed. Xiaofan hesitated to speak, while Xiaoqin kept muttering to herself. In the end, Xiaofan sighed and said, Mom and Dad, your health is most important. Xiaoqin and I will find a way. And so, Jingwo and I returned to the hometown we hadn't seen in many years. Standing on the familiar hillside, looking at the small village surrounded by green trees in the distance, smelling the fragrance of soil and grass in the air. We were filled with a long-lost sense of peace. However, this peace didn't last long. 3 days ago, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. I never expected it would be about something like this. It turned out we had never known. Xiaofan and Xiaoqin were still giving money to my mother-in-law. I was so angry that my whole body trembled. I immediately called Xiaofan. Xiaofan, what's going on? Why are you giving your mother-in-law money? I questioned. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. Then Xiaofan replied in a low voice. Mom, it's Xiaoqin who insists on giving it. She said if we don't give money, her mother will cause trouble. I had no choice. Hearing this, I became even more furious. We worked so hard to help you buy a house. Now we can barely take care of ourselves. And yet you still have spare money to give to Xiaoqin's mom for playing cards. I was about to continue questioning, but Zhang Wo stopped me. Li Juan, don't ask anymore. He shook his head gently and said, asking will only make things more tense. Let's just focus on living our own lives. Looking at the tiredness in Zhang Wo's eyes, a pang of sorrow filled my heart. Yes, we're old. What more can we expect? At that moment, Xiaofan's voice came from the phone. Mom, I'm sorry. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said, Xiaofan, handle your own affairs. Your dad and I are old. We just want to live the rest of our lives in peace. After saying this, I hung up the phone. After putting down the phone, Zhang Wo and I sat in silence. The afterglow of the sunset spreading across the distant mountains, painting half the sky red. We sat there quietly, letting our thoughts drift in the river of time. I remember when I first married Zhang Wo. We lived in a mud house. The roof was covered with straw, and on rainy days, it would always leak. We would run around with pots, catching water, busy but happy. Although life was hard, we supported each other, our hearts always filled with hope. The year Xiaofan was born was the happiest time of our lives. Looking at the baby in swaddling clothes, Zhang Wo and I seemed to see a beautiful future. We secretly vowed that we would give our child a good life, so he wouldn't have to suffer like we did. For this promise, we sacrificed so much. I remember when Xiaofan was in school, we scrimped and saved to buy him a new school bag. I remember how difficult it was to scrape together his college tuition. And I remember the heartache of emptying our savings to buy him a house when he got married. At that time, we thought that giving would bring rewards, that a filial son would surely take good care of us in the future. But reality gave us a harsh slap in the face. Li Juan, don't be sad. Zhang Wo gently held my hand, his eyes full of pity. We didn't live our lives in vain. We raised Xiaofan, and we can say we've lived with a clear conscience. I nodded, but tears kept falling. Yes, we've lived with a clear conscience. But what about our children? Where is their conscience? Thinking of this, a deep fatigue washed over me. For so many years, we've been living for others, for our son, for our daughter-in-law, for our grandchildren. But now, when we most need care, they discard us like an old shoe. Zhang Wo, what should we do in the future? I asked softly. Zhang Wo was silent for a moment, then firmly said, we'll live our lives well. Our pension may not be much, but if we're frugal, we can still manage. Besides, we're back in our hometown, with familiar neighbors and scenery. We can plant some vegetables, raise some chickens, live a peaceful and self-sufficient life. Hearing Zhang Wo's words, I suddenly felt a surge of warmth in my heart. Yes, we can live our lives well. We don't need to rely on anyone. We can live independently. Thinking of this, I no longer felt sadness. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. Letting go of expectations for our children and focusing on ourselves is perhaps the best way to live. All right, Jangwo, let's live our own lives well. I smiled and said, from now on, we'll enjoy the rest of our lives together, no longer worrying about others. Jangwo nodded. A smile finally appeared on his face. We held each other's hands, watching the sunset gradually disappear behind the mountains, feeling an unprecedented sense of peace. Yes, we're old, but we still have the right to pursue happiness, the right to live for ourselves. No matter what happens, we will face it together and enjoy the rest of our lives in peace. All right, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope today's sharing has touched you in some way. For those who haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click subscribe so we can accompany you every day. Let's grow together, be happy together, and slowly grow old together. We'll see you next time.